An injured wolf begs at the door, and what the man did next changed everything forever. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across John's quiet backyard. He was pruning the overgrown rose bushes near the fence, savoring the rare peace of the day. A soft breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass, mingling with the faint hum of distant traffic. It was a routine day, unremarkable in every way, until it wasn't. A faint scratching sound reached his ears. At first, he thought it was the wind brushing a branch against the door. He continued trimming, dismissing it as nothing unusual. But then it came again, persistent, almost deliberate. He stopped, heart skipping a beat. The sound was coming from his back door, faint but insistent. John glanced toward the house, a twinge of unease prickling his skin. He wasn't expecting visitors, and the sound didn't match that of any stray animal he'd encountered before. Curiosity wrestled with caution as he made his way toward the door, wiping his hands on his jeans. The scratching stopped as soon as he stepped onto the porch. For a moment, silence enveloped the backyard, the kind that made his chest tighten. John hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Slowly he turned it and pulled the door open, the creak of the hinges breaking the stillness. There, on the threshold, was a sight that made his breath hitch. An enormous wolf, its fur streaked with dirt and blood, lay sprawled across the mat. Its sides heaved with labored breaths, and its eyes, piercing amber yet soft with desperation, met his own. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. John's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to slam the door and call for help. A wolf, a wild predator. It didn't belong here, and yet here it was, trembling and vulnerable, its gaze locked onto him as if pleading. The wolf shifted slightly, whimpering, a sound so raw and pitiful that it pierced through John's fear. It tried to lift a paw but winced, collapsing back onto the mat. The gash on its leg was deep, the fur around it matted with dried blood. John's pulse raced. He wanted to move, to act, but his body was frozen in place. His mind churned with questions. Why is it here? How did it get hurt? Should I help? The wolf whimpered again, snapping him out of his trance. He took a shaky step back, his heart pounding as he weighed his options. His logical side told him to walk away, call animal control, and let the professionals handle it. But the wolf's eyes, those haunting, desperate eyes, seemed to reach into his soul, pleading for compassion. It wasn't just a wounded animal lying on his porch, it was a life hanging by a thread. Something about the sheer vulnerability of the creature stirred an ache deep within him. John exhaled slowly, his decision made. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't ignore this. Whatever the risk, he had to help. John's hands trembled as he stood in the doorway, staring at the injured wolf. His mind raced with doubts, questions, and a growing sense of unease. What am I doing? This is a wild animal. What if it attacks? The wolf let out another soft whimper, its body twitching slightly as if John ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. He had no experience with animals beyond his childhood dog, and this was a far cry from patching up a pet. Still, he couldn't just stand there. Grabbing the first aid kit from the bathroom, he returned to the wolf's side. "All right, let's see if we can fix you up," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He cleaned the wound as gently as possible, wincing every time the wolf flinched. "Sorry, girl," he murmured, unsure why he assumed it was female. He worked slowly, applying antiseptic and wrapping the leg in gauze. As he worked, the wolf surprised him again. It didn't growl or try to pull away. Instead, it lay still, its eyes fixed on him. When he finished, it nudged his hand weakly with its nose, a gesture so unexpected that John froze. "You're welcome," he whispered, a lump forming in his throat. John placed a bowl of water and some leftover chicken near the wolf, then sat back, watching as it sniffed the offerings cautiously. It took a few hesitant bites before lying back down, exhausted but calmer. For the first time that evening, John allowed himself to breathe. He leaned against the wall, staring at the creature he'd just invited into his home. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on him, but there was no denying the strange sense of fulfillment settling in his chest. He didn't know what would happen next or if he'd made the right decision, but one thing was certain: he couldn't turn his back on the wolf now. The next morning, John woke up to the sound of soft movements in the living room. For a split second, he forgot about the events of the previous night. Then it hit him: the wolf. He rushed out of the bedroom, unsure of what to expect. There, on the rug near the fireplace, the wolf lay watching him. Its amber eyes were calmer now, less desperate but still wary. It shifted slightly, wincing as its injured leg brushed against the floor. "Good morning," John said cautiously, keeping his distance. He wasn't sure if it was safe to approach yet, but he noticed a change in the animal's demeanor. It wasn't trembling anymore, and though it was clearly still in pain, there was a faint strength returning to its posture. John prepared some food, a mixture of boiled chicken and rice, and placed the bowl a few feet away from the wolf. It sniffed the air, its nose twitching, but didn't move right away. "It's okay," John said, taking a step back to give it space. After a moment, the wolf leaned forward, gingerly taking a bite. John watched in silence, marveling at how deliberate and cautious the creature was. Despite its wild nature, there was a grace in its movements, even in its weakened state. As the days turned into weeks, John found himself falling into a routine he never expected. He tended to the wolf's wound daily, carefully cleaning and rebandaging it. Each time, the wolf grew a little more trusting, flinching less under his touch. At first, it was too weak to move much, but as it regained its strength, it began exploring the house. John often caught it watching him from a corner, its intelligent eyes studying his every move. It was as if the wolf was trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand it. One evening, as John sat on the couch reading, the wolf surprised him by limping over and lying down near his feet. He froze, unsure of what to do. Then, cautiously, he reached out a hand. The wolf sniffed it before nudging it gently with its nose. "Luna," John said suddenly, the name slipping out without thought. He wasn't sure why it felt right, but it did. "I think I'll call you Luna." Over time, their bond deepened. Luna began following him around the house, her movements becoming steadier as her leg healed. She would watch him cook, occasionally nudging him for scraps. At night, she would settle near the fireplace, her presence filling the once-empty room with a sense of companionship. John found himself fascinated by her. He spent hours researching wolves, learning about their social structures, behaviors, and habitats. He was amazed by their intelligence and loyalty, traits he now saw firsthand in Luna. But Luna wasn't just healing physically, she was changing John too. Her quiet strength and resilience inspired him. The simple act of caring for her gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. One day, as John sat on the porch watching Luna rest in the sunlight, he realized something profound. She wasn't just a wolf anymore. She was a part of his life, a connection he hadn't known he needed. For the first time in a long while, John felt like he wasn't alone. Luna had brought a sense of hope and meaning to his days, and as she grew stronger, so did he. As Luna's strength returned, John began to notice changes, not just in the wolf, but in himself. The days no longer felt empty. The quiet loneliness that had once filled his house was now replaced by the soft padding of Luna's paws and her steady, watchful presence. One morning, as John prepared breakfast, he looked out the window to see Luna standing in the backyard, her fur glistening in the morning sun. She seemed so at ease, her once timid demeanor now replaced with quiet confidence. It struck him how much she had changed from the desperate, injured creature that had arrived at his door weeks ago. But what struck him more was the transformation within himself. John had always lived a solitary life. retreating from people and focusing on his own routines. Now, caring for Luna had forced him to step outside of that bubble. He had become patient, attentive, and unexpectedly protective. One day, as he walked through town to pick up supplies, a neighbor stopped him. "Hey, John," she said, smiling warmly. "I heard about the wolf you're taking care of. That's incredible." John was taken aback. He had barely spoken to anyone in the neighborhood before this. "Oh, it's nothing," he said, shrugging awkwardly. "No, really," she insisted, "it's inspiring. Not everyone would have done what you did." Word of Luna's rescue had spread, and soon more neighbors began reaching out. People dropped by with food, bandages, and even books about wolves. John, who had spent years keeping to himself, suddenly found himself part of a community. Luna, too, played a role in this transformation. She seemed to sense when visitors were nervous, greeting them with calm eyes and gentle movements. Her presence had an almost magical effect, drawing people in and softening even the hardest hearts. One afternoon, as John sat on the porch with Luna at his side, an elderly man from down the street approached. "I wanted to thank you," the man said. "Thank me? For what?" John asked, puzzled. "For reminding us that kindness still exists," the man replied. "What you did, it's more than just helping an animal. It's a reminder that even the most unexpected lives deserve a second chance." John didn't know how to respond. He looked down at Luna, who nudged his hand gently, as if to say she agreed. As the weeks went by, John began to see the world differently. Luna's recovery mirrored his own journey, pulling him out of his isolation and teaching him the value of connection and compassion. He found himself more willing to engage with others, to share his experiences, and to listen to theirs. One evening, as he sat by the fire with Luna curled up at his feet, John realized just how much had changed. He no longer felt like the same man who had hesitated to open the door that fateful night. Luna had not only survived, she had given him a reason to live more fully. The wolf's arrival had been an unexpected disruption to his quiet life, but it had become the most meaningful chapter of his story. Through her, he discovered courage, purpose, and the strength to let people back into his world, and through him, Luna had found a safe haven, a place where fear gave way to trust and pain gave way to healing. The day John had been dreading finally arrived. Luna was fully healed. Her leg, once mangled and weak, was now strong enough to carry her effortlessly across the yard. Her fur had regained its luster, and her eyes were bright, full of life and spirit. John watched her from the porch as she prowled the edge of the backyard, her nose lifting to the wind, catching scents that seemed to call to her. She was a wolf, after all, a creature of the wild. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John sat by the fire with Luna at his side. He stroked her thick fur, his heart heavy. "You've got to go, don't you?" he whispered. Luna looked up at him, her amber eyes calm yet knowing. It was as if she understood everything he was saying. The thought of letting her go tore at him. Over the past few months, Luna had become more than just a wild animal in his care. She had become a companion, a friend, and in some ways, a reflection of himself. But keeping her here, away from the life she was meant for, wasn't right. The next morning, John loaded Luna into his truck, her head resting on his lap as he drove toward a nearby forest reserve. The drive was silent, but heavy with unspoken emotion. John's hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, as if holding on to the moment for just a little longer. When they arrived, John stepped out and opened the truck door. Luna leapt down gracefully, her body taut with energy. She sniffed the air, her ears twitching at the sounds of the forest. John knelt down beside her, placing a hand on her head. "You'll be okay out here," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "This is where you belong." For a moment, Luna stood still, her gaze fixed on him. Then, in a move that caught him off guard, she leaned forward and nuzzled his face. The gesture was so tender, so deliberate, that John felt tears sting his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice barely audible. With one last lock, Luna turned and bounded into the forest. John watched as her silhouette disappeared among the trees, her powerful form blending seamlessly with the wild. Years passed, but Luna's impact on John's life never faded. Her story became a cornerstone of who he was, a story he shared often, not to boast, but to inspire. People from nearby towns would come to hear about the wolf that changed his life, and John always welcomed them with a warm smile and an open heart. Over time, John's work with animals expanded. What began as a quiet gesture of kindness in his backyard transformed into a full-fledged animal rehabilitation initiative. With the help of volunteers, donations, and the encouragement of his community, John established a small sanctuary on the edge of town. The sanctuary became a haven for injured and orphaned animals, foxes, deer, owls, even the occasional coyote. Each animal was a reminder of Luna, and John treated them with the same care and respect he had given her. He named the sanctuary Luna's Haven in honor of the wolf who had set everything into motion. But Luna's legacy wasn't just about the animals. The sanctuary became a place where people could connect with nature, with each other, and with themselves. John hosted workshops, storytelling nights, and guided walks through the surrounding forest. Children would laugh and marvel as they learned about the animals, while adults found solace in the peace of the sanctuary. One chilly winter evening, John sat by the fire, reflecting on how far things had come. The house was no longer quiet and lonely. It was alive with purpose, filled with the sounds of animals, the laughter of visitors, and the steady hum of community. As he sipped his tea, his thoughts turned to Luna. He wondered where she was now, if she still roamed the forest, or if she had started her own pack. He liked to believe that she had found happiness and freedom just as he had. One day, while walking along the forest trail, John stumbled upon something that made his breath catch. It was a paw print, large and unmistakably belonging to a wolf. It was old, partially obscured by fallen leaves, but it was there. He knelt beside it, his hand hovering over the imprint. A wave of emotion washed over him, gratitude, love, and a bittersweet longing. "You're still out there," he murmured, a small smile playing on his lips. As the years went by, Luna's story became more than just a tale of survival. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of compassion. People who visited Luna's Haven often left with something intangible but profound, a sense of connection, a spark of inspiration, and a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways they couldn't imagine. John, now older and wiser, often sat with the visitors, sharing Luna's story. "She came into my life when I needed her most," he would say. "I thought I was saving her, but she saved me. She taught me how to live, how to trust, and how to open my heart again." On the anniversary of the day Luna appeared at his door, John would light a candle and place it by the window, a quiet tribute to the wolf who had changed everything. And though she was gone, her spirit lived on, in the sanctuary, in the animals it saved, and in the lives it touched. Luna was more than a wolf. She was a reminder of what it meant to be truly alive.